We are quickly approaching All-Star Weekend and the trade deadline for the NBA season. We'll talk about what that means for some former Louisville Cardinals standouts on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back in to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. We have another special guest on for today's show, one that you're probably familiar with. That is Forbes.com NBA writer Shane Young, my good friend. Shane, what's going on, man?
I'm doing great. A little bit cold today. I saw it was snowing. Not too thrilled about that. So, yeah, that's me. How about you?
I'm doing good. What are you recording at night? Recording in the dark?
Hey, man, I'm still tired. So this is not a great Saturday starting off. And all I want to do is play ball this weekend. So hopefully I can do that.
Man, you're not kidding. You're not kidding. But speaking of ball, we're going to take a little bit of a step back, and we focus on, obviously, it's the Locked On Louisville podcast, to cover it in all of its entirety, starting to look at cards in the NBA. We've done a couple segments on this, bringing Shane back to talk about former cards leading up to the All-Star Weekend. Which first segment want to talk about, should Donovan Mitchell be named a starter in the Western Conference? Shane will give his rationale. We'll then transition into Montrezl Harrell and being on an expiring contract, a guy that has been rumored to possibly be headed elsewhere to a title contender. We'll talk about the best possible fits for him. And then finally, Jordan Nwora is on the docket for the last segment and discussing his overall progression in year 2 of his respective NBA career and what that means for his possible ceiling. Before we get into the content of today's show, you can check out our social media Twitter handles in the graphics below. Shane, I know you like that graphic. Definitely a very cool tool. Shane was actually on the Locked On Pacers podcast last week, so I can't act like I'm the first one to introduce him to this graphic. But I digress. Let's get right on into it. Donovan Mitchell, for those who are not aware, named the NBA Player of the Month for December, averaging at 30.2 points per game, 5 assists, 3.2 rebounds per game, respectively. The Jazz were 10-2 in that 12-game stretch. He was the first Utah Jazz player to be named Player of the Month back, I think it's Deron Williams, back in like November of 2010 or something like that. But ultimately, great month for Donovan Mitchell. However, due to the emergence of another player, the question has to be asked: should Donovan Mitchell be named the starter alongside Stephen Curry in the Western Conference?
Dalton, it's honestly probably the toughest, I guess, like positional battle here that I've seen for All-Star in probably like half a decade. I mean, normally it's all clear cut, right? Like usually, as we talked about before, it's Steph and Damian Lillard. Those two are always at the top of the mountain when it comes to the backcourt. Dame's had a bad year for his standards. He's opened up a door for these other guards, these younger guards to come in. And I know you love Ja Morant. Ja Morant's like probably your favorite player at this point. So it's pretty cool to watch. Close. It's cool to watch what he's doing for a team that should not be 30-15 like Memphis is, that they are greatly overachieving. So I guess you kind of have to use that for his case as well. Just watching what Donovan's done, though, I kind of want to lean him for production. He's played, I think, 6 more games, a few more games than Ja Morant. Ja had a lengthy absence back a few weeks ago before he came back. I understand that Memphis jumped Utah in the standings by a game and a half, 2 games. I just feel like Donovan Mitchell's body of work, though, for the whole year, his shooting, his improved playmaking, I really want to say Donovan deserves to be there over Ja right now, because we know Ja is going to have his foot in the door for 15 plus years after this, right? So I think it's Donovan's time to start next to Steph. I would not be angry either way, considering you could probably argue per minute wise, Ja Morant's been better than Donovan Mitchell per minute, but I think the extra games, the body of work, I'd go with Donovan.
Yeah. Ultimately, I probably lean Ja just because I think, like I said, I think you're splitting hairs at this point just because
Yeah.
both of them are both very deserving candidates. And like I said, I think that this is no reflection or indication that Donovan Mitchell is struggling in the past couple weeks or anything like that. I just think it's more, just kind of, a resemblance of how solid Ja has been. You have to factor, I mean, personally, I think, if you put two prospects, side by side, and you know realize their stats are kind of similar, production's kind of similar, but one team is 30 and 15, one team is 15 and 30, then I'm like,
Oh
okay, let's
yeah.
go with the guy from the winning team, just in my opinion, because if it's that close, like if the guy who's on the losing team is leaps and bounds better, then go ahead and put him on. But the fact that they're very comparable, and the fact that Memphis is just on a complete tear,
Yeah.
their 11-game winning streak was snapped against the Mavericks last Friday night, but they were still incredible up until that point. I think it's more just so of an indication of how well Ja is playing rather than Donovan being bad or anything like that. But like you mentioned, I would not be mad either way. Both
Yeah.
of them are having tremendous seasons. I want to use this kind of transition into looking at Donovan Mitchell's body of work this season. He's appeared in 38 games, all 38 when she started, averaging 25.7 points per game, which is second in his career behind last season. He is currently shooting the best of all of any of his past 5 years, I believe, from the field, not necessarily from 3-point line, but from the field as well, twos included. Assists are pretty much right on, track with what he's been doing. Rebounds as well. I mean, we mentioned before the season whether or not we were going to see kind of I don't like to use plateau as the word, but I don't necessarily know what else to use in terms of where he's at in his career. Is there like room for more growth? I mean, I'm not saying could he reach like a Damian Lillard type scoring average, but
Yeah. It's
seemingly
really.
where he's at with the Jazz, they have a couple different mouths to feed. I mean, do you see, him taking the next step, and what does that next step include? Because obviously it
Yeah.
doesn't look like that's coming in a statistical measure.
No, we talked before the year about is there room for him to be a top 10 player in the NBA? And I think we both kind of agreed that that while it's possible, it's hard to knock someone off. And it just continues to go back to the Dame Lillard stuff. It's like if that guy falls off the mountain a little bit, it opens up a spot for somebody. And I really do believe Donovan Mitchell is stepping into that. So I remember we talked about, like, could Donovan be like an All NBA first team or second team guy? At the rate he was going, before COVID struck Utah and Utah was coming for the number one seed in the West, I think they still have the second best point differential in the NBA. So, I mean, they've been a dominant team. And I think, I think Donovan can get into that stratosphere. It's going to take getting a lot better on defense. Rudy Gobert actually just like called out the entire Utah Jazz backcourt
All
and
that.
every guard and wing on the team because of how they're just letting guys into the paint at will. So I mean, Donovan has to get better in that regard. And honestly, if you want to keep the comparisons to Ja Morant here, Ja's not that great of a defender either yet, and he's not expected to be. Like, neither of these guys, they're offensive engines. Like, they're not these defensive, stalwarts. So it's gonna be wild to watch how both of them try to one up each other and get into that, like, all NBA first team, second team thing. Now, if you ask me, I do think Donovan Mitchell could be on the short list of MVP candidates one year. It looked like it was going to be this year because MVP is kind of wide open before Giannis took a grip on it last week. But yeah, I think Donovan can get into like the fifth spot in that on the ballots there if Utah continues to have a good season. So yeah, I mean there is room for improvement. You're not going to see it. You're not going to see him average 30 points. You're not going to see these like insane statistical seasons that LeBron and Jokic and
Even
Giannis put up. You're
even
just not
that
going to
guy
see
who
that.
used to play for the Rockets, whatever his name was.
Oh, Jimmy something. Yeah,
Yeah, Jimmy something. But I like that you say that because and that's no disrespect to Donovan. I mean, Donovan is a number one option. I mean, he's exceeded expectations coming out of Louisville and into the NBA. Not. I think people get a little upset and they get in their feelings when you call it how it is. And, some people are like, well, why is Donovan Mitchell not a top 5 NBA potential player? Just because
Because
he's
there's a
not.
lot of players. There's a lot of players doing well. Like you can't.
Yeah.
There's only room for 5. The
Yeah,
top 5 can't be 10 people.
I mean,
Right?
the thing for Donovan shouldn't be rising into that stratosphere. The thing for him should be getting over the hump and getting to the finals and winning a title. That's where, players prioritize. That's what they
Yeah.
prioritize. So
You
ulti-
you did mention that there's a lot of mouths to feed in Utah, offensively. I think that can be changed because if you ask me now, gun to my head, I think Utah will make a trade towards the deadline to kind of lessen the offensive production and improve their defense. So whether that's getting rid of Joe Ingles, who doesn't require a lot
Daniel
of shots.
Tice. There we
Oh
go.
my gosh, please. Or they love Jordan. Hey, they love Jordan Clarkson in Salt Lake City, but
Daniel Tice.
the defensive deficiencies are there. So if you clear out some scoring production there, it opens up Donovan to do more. So
I like that a ton. I want to now get into the Montrezl Harrell segment because I feel like this could be a little longer as we identify the teams and the possible fits with those teams. But definitely Donovan is doing great things, regardless if he's named a starter or not. We're definitely extremely proud of him here in the Ville. I want to take this time before we get into the Montrezl Harrell segment to talk about our friends at NetSuite. I want you to imagine a scenario. This is it, the putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software. To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. It's the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth and everything you need to grow all in one place. You can automate your processes and close your books in no time while staying well ahead of the competition. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. For the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Head to netsuite.com/locked for this special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses, netsuite.com/locked. As I mentioned, special episode today, we're joined by Forbes.com NBA writer Shane Young, good buddy of mine, good buddy of the show. I think this is your third appearance on, Shane? Second or third? Yeah, third for sure. Want to transition now into the Montrezl Harrell segment. There were kind of talks at the beginning of the season that he was going to be a candidate at the deadline to possibly go to a contender. Kind of, started off the season really well in Washington. He's kind of tapered off a little bit as we expected. But just a couple days ago, word coming out that there was a physical altercation between him and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I believe it was either at halftime or after the game.
Yeah.
Halftime, but it was in the locker room. Not necessarily saying that would force him to be traded, but he is on an expiring deal, making just under $10 million annually this season. So it is possible that they can finagle a trade to a title contender to try to get back a future asset. #1, we'll start out with how feasible do you think it is that Trez does get traded here, in the next month?
I think it's a good possibility. He is contractually tied with all these guys that are on these expiring deals on the mid-level exception, one being Serge Ibaka. Like, if Serge is eligible, is likely to be traded, probably so is Montrez, especially since Montrez is producing at a good offensive value right now, I guess, for his contract. But Dalton, like you asked me last night, man, what kind of teams would be, or #1, is it feasible that he'll be traded? Yes, I think so. But does he absolutely need it to be to a contender? Because to be honest with you, I know Louisville fans love the guy and he helped them tremendously at Louisville, but I don't think that there's a contender out there like a top tier or tier 2 contender that is slobbering about trading for Montrez. Like I really don't think there is.
And that's why it's so hard to kind of predict where he would go, just because #1, it's hard to gauge how interested NBA teams are in him, and you never know. I mean, all it takes is one team at the top to go, hey, we need some interior toughness that can give us X amount of minutes per game. We're kind of depleted in the front court. We don't need him to do much except for
like there's one team that
there's one team that I want to look at, and that is the Chicago Bulls. They did lose Patrick Williams earlier in the season. Kind of, I think, more skilled Trez kind of brings
Mhm.
a lot of the same stuff. Probably a better ball handler, obviously. But Trez making under $10 million a year, depending on who they would have to send out. They
Yeah.
are currently basically 4.5 under the luxury tax. Like I mentioned, I'm not sure who you would send out. Maybe, Troy Brown, Tony Bradley, package those two together and, bring Trez in. But I think that his skill set really fits Chicago's rotation, but also kind of fits their identity, kind of that blue collar. We have a lot of high energy guys, DeMar,
Yeah.
Lonzo, Caruso, Vucevic. And I look at it, they don't have a high energy guy in the front court outside of maybe Derrick Jones Jr., but he's not like a true big or anything like that.
He just got hurt too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, Trez could be an option there. It'll be interesting to see where Chicago goes because I do think they make a move. I think they're going to gun for it. This is probably going to be one of their better opportunities to do so in some time. So we'll see.
For the Bulls, I know where I stand on this, but I also want to ask you, I kind of like the idea for them to go after a Jeremy Grant than I do a Trez, even though Jeremy Grant requires a lot more money to trade out. Like
That's the issue here is because when I look at what Chicago has right now on the books, I'm questioning what they would be willing to send away to
Patrick
get
Williams
out Jeremy Grant.
Patrick Williams has to be in that deal.
No, 100% he does. And even that
and
might
they
not
love
be
him,
enough because
though.
Jeremy Grant's playing very well.
Yeah. Patrick Williams and then maybe some salary fillers, but I think the problem in Chicago is you said that they need to go for it. You said you think they'll go for it, and this is a window they can get into to maybe get to the East Finals and NBA Finals. I kind of think they are also thinking long term as well. Like, why do we have to make a push now? Let's kind of wait. I kind of would side with you that
makes why would they think that though? I mean, I can see why like that they would because teams with a younger nucleus, but DeMar's not getting any younger.
Yeah,
Nikola
DeMar's like
Vucevic is
32.
not getting any younger. So unless you have clear backup plans for both of those guys, which you don't, unless you think that we've seen that Levine can't win on his own.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would put my chips forward and go and try to go for it as well. With Trez, is that the move? Like, it could help.
If anything, I think they could probably go after a guy like Christian Wood. I think Christian Wood is an interesting fit for them just because he can score. No Rockets analysis or anything like that. But are there any other teams that you look at like for Trez that you think, okay, you know what, I like this?
There's a team that in the West that I think I do like.
Don't say the Rockets. Don't you do it?
No, it's not the Rockets.
Good.
We're talking playoff teams.
Okay,
not quite Rockets yet.
Hurts,
maybe a couple years.
Truthful.
Yeah. There's a team in Texas that I think would be okay. I just don't like their coaching fit. It's the Dallas Mavericks. I don't know if you want Trez in that locker room. I don't know if you want Trez in there when they're trying to fix stuff. Like Dallas is in a repairing season. Like they hired Jason Kidd. Everyone in the world didn't like the trade or didn't like the signing when it happened, and they've disappointed since. They just come off a big win the other night against Memphis, yes, but it seems like they can't get all their ducks in a row. Do you want to bring more, I guess, chaos into that? I don't know, but I kind of feel like I would. I don't know about you, but I like the Luka Trez pick and roll in some bench units. I like Jalen Brunson Trez pick and roll on the bench. I kind of like the spacing if Trez is going to roll hard and finish with authority, which he's one of the best bigs in terms of finishing at the rim this year. So that helps clear out the spacing for the shooters. Man, I kind of like that fit. I know Dallas is souring on Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber, both guys that they just don't feel like are giving them enough. So how do you feel about Dallas?
It really just kind of depends on. I just don't know what the hell Dallas is doing right now.
Nobody does.
I feel like they're just trying to play damage control with Kristaps Porzingis, and although Porzingis is playing, probably the best ball of any Maverick out there right now, like you mentioned last night on the phone. I still think that contract's a mistake. They gunned for it and they took a flyer on a player that has potential, but it's obvious that he's not the player that he used to be
Yeah.
pre-injury. So and that was always kind of a concern. But I just don't know how I feel
Hey,
about Dallas being a trade partner, just because I don't know how I feel about Dallas in
mhm,
general.
that's
So
true.
that's kind of
Jason
where I'm like,
Kidd
what the hell?
Jason Kidd did coach Trez last year, which I did not even think about until this year, until now, till right this
Mhm.
second. There's that familiarity there with the Lakers. But like as you mentioned, as I mentioned, I guess, like, do you want Trez in there to kind of, I guess, take minutes away from KP in some instances? Which, and by the way, like, is Trez going to be happy with going to I guess, like a tier 3 contending team and not really receiving as many touches, not getting as many minutes? Like, does he want that? What, we haven't even answered that question. Like,
Well, the
does
issue
he
is
want? Does
it
he want
really
to go?
doesn't matter what he wants at the end of the day because he's under contract.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. But you're right. I mean, this is a contract year for him. Like, he's not getting any younger. He's about to enter 30 here in a little while. So I think that is something that they could use. I like the Hornets as a possible option
I
because
thought about them, but they're not a
Mason
contender. So
Plumlee as the go-to guy down low. I mean, I just feel like they need an extra. I mean, I like what they're getting from Miles Bridges. I like what they're getting from PJ Washington, but I feel like Trez just kind of brings a different playing style to both of those guys, obviously.
what
So
about transition in terms of LaMelo forcing turnovers and Trez running the break? Be pretty nice.
I do like the thing about it is I think Trez flourishes in systems to where he doesn't have to even be like a top four scorer, and I don't think he's gonna have to be a top four scorer anywhere he goes. But
Yeah,
especially
especially not in
in
Chicago.
Yeah, especially not in Chicago. Likely not in Dallas either. Um, I think Charlotte is another team to where I think honestly the team that's going to take an opportunity on Trez. It's not going to be one of those teams that is legitimately a title contender right now. I think it's going to be one of those
Mhm.
teams that will do anything that's possible. That's not going to break the bank. That's kind of on the outside looking in.
Mhm.
That makes that move. I think Charlotte's one of those teams.
Let
So.
let's say he doesn't get traded and he just goes into free agency. Do you think a contender will try to make him will try to get him to sign for cheap?
Well, possibly, but I think he probably learned that lesson signing with the Lakers and leaving money on the
Mhm.
table. I think he's going to probably just be, whoever offers the most money is where he's going to go.
Yeah,
Obviously,
me
he
too.
may have some preferences, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all about securing the bag, so to speak, getting as much guaranteed money over, guaranteed years. So I could really look for him trying to either A, go for like the most money for a 1 year deal or try to get more money across like a 3 or 4 year span, even if it's like less per annual value. So,
So he's
well,
returning to the Rockets is what you're telling me.
I hope not. I wouldn't mind Trez if it didn't break the bank, but we've got some stuff brewing in H Town. So, want to transition now the final segment of the show with Forbes.com NBA writer Shane Young. That is revolving around Jordan Nwora, second year in Milwaukee, coming off of an NBA title, 1 year, one title, 2 years, two titles possibly. We'll talk about that here in just a second after we talk about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline would like to wish a happy new betting year as we continue our march uh, toward the NFL playoffs, which started last weekend and beyond. It remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2023. A new year brings a new updated desktop and mobile website. To sign up today and use the promo code Locked On and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit from football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports, and BetOnline is where the game starts. Jordan Nwora this season averaging 9 points per game, which is essentially a 3.3 points per game increase over last season. He's playing pretty much double the minutes from last year. Not necessarily shooting the ball well from the field. From the three-point line, he's shooting about 38%, which is respectable. Career high in rebounds, obviously, career high in assists, etc. So, obviously, the opportunity is not necessarily there for him yet. He's seeing a little bit of an uptick in minutes, but he's still kind of far down the pecking order. Um, from what you've seen from Jordan Nwora this year, how does that kind of affect what you feel his ceiling is that he could
Yeah.
ultimately reach one day?
By the way, I love the uptick in volume. I love the higher volume. Uh, Already taking over 4 threes a game for him off the bench. What 20 something minutes a game? Hey, it's a lot of shots he's getting up at least. So that's good
Right.
for their system. I love that. I also like the idea, or I like the concept of um, Louisville having these guys that play such drastically different roles. Like Donovan is the star in Utah. If they win the title, he'll be the guy. Jordan Nwora is like this rotation piece in Milwaukee, a team that could and probably should be the favorite to win the title this year again. So it's just all these different roles I like. For Jordan, at least, one thing that's interesting is I don't know how he has been I don't know how he was at Louisville. I don't watch college ball, Dalton, but he
Your
seems in the
loss.
NBA. He seems in the NBA to be a great play finisher, not so much a great play creator or a great self creator. It seems like he's doing his best work on the court when he's letting the offense come to him, when he's getting the ball, attacking with making a decision within 1 or 2 seconds. Not really holding on to it, shooting, passing, driving. Do something in 1 or 2 seconds. It seems like Mike Budenholzer has kind of put that responsibility on guys to not let the ball stick. So I do like what I see when he puts the ball on the floor and tries to get to the rim. Shooting very great at the rim so far. For his size, was he 6'7", 6'8"?
Yeah,
You
about
you
six
like
seven.
you like to see that he's finishing amongst the trees like that. So for me, I kind of thought when you asked me like what could a ceiling be in the NBA one day, I don't necessarily think that he'll be as good of a player as a Terry Rozier. Like I think Terry Rozier will be a better player than Jordan Nwora, like in the long run. But it's kind of like approaching. I think he could approach what Terry Rozier has done. I don't know, maybe in the Boston days, if that makes sense. Like maybe not necessarily like the number one guy in Charlotte like Terry was a couple of years back, but I think he could be like a really good championship level role player if he continues this.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's kind of hard to predict where he ends up in terms of ceiling because he's better as a guy who plays off ball rather than creating for himself, and that was kind of
Mhm,
always the case at Louisville. I mean, he could always kind of create his shot, like if it was
mhm.
using screens or anything like that, or in catch and shoot situations. But in terms of facilitator, and that's kind of just not him. And I think that
Yeah.
obviously Mike Budenholzer knows that he uses him in the perfect way to kind of complement Jordan's skill set. I'm with you. I don't necessarily think he ever truly fits Terry's level. I feel like Terry, on a great year, could try to flirt with all-star contention
Yeah.
if everything goes right for him, right? So I could see him securing his bag though. I mean, making around 14, 15 million a year if everything goes smoothly, which is
At his
obviously a pretty
peak.
good. Yeah, that's obviously a
Mhm.
pretty good career if you're making that annually. So I could see him as a possible, obviously a double digit scorer. I mean, he's already
Yeah.
averaging 9 in his second season, so I could see him, depending on if he stays in Milwaukee or wherever he goes, depending on who the scoring priorities are deviated to. I think he could be like a 15 to
Yeah.
16, peak level scorer.
You mentioned the catch and shoot production, how that's something. It really does seem like all these Louisville products, with the exclusion of Trez, really good off catch and shoots. Like Terry was, Donovan obviously is.
That's crazy
Um,
because Louisville's never been like a juggernaut offensive team. Like they've always kind of
yeah.
made their under all these guys we're talking about are Rick Pitino guys, and
hmm
Rick Pitino's teams were not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing offensively, but they were so
Jordan
good
was a Rick Pitino
defensively.
guy.
Yeah, Jordan was well
Recruit,
he,
I
he
guess you could say.
yeah, because Pitino got fired when Nwora was going into. Well, hold on. Yeah,
It's
Nwora was
somewhere
going to be
around there.
Nwora was a freshman going into his freshman year, the year that Pitino got fired.
Yeah.
So, he played under Padgett the first year, and then Chris Mack the next 2 years. So,
Yeah, so far this year for Jordan in a championship system that honestly Milwaukee's been missing a lot of guys due to COVID and injury. So he's been forced to play the minute load he is. 32% of Jordan Nwora's possessions have ended in a spot up. That's a good chunk. Like he's mostly a catch and shoot guy. 18% of those, 18% of his possessions. So I guess almost half of them are spot up or transition. So hey, like if Milwaukee is going to play this aggressive defense with Drew Holiday forcing turnovers, Giannis forcing turnovers, or blocking people at the rim and getting out in the break, what better than a 6'7" type wing to kind of help you finish in that transition role? So I like whenever they get the ball out and run. It seems like Jordan Nwora is going to be a dynamic finisher in that regard, and it all goes back to what we were saying. Not going to be a playmaker, not going to be this self-sufficient pull-up mid-range god. I don't see that in his future. It just seems like, hey, you remember how Jeremy Grant was for Denver? Like, let Jokic and Jamal Murray do everything, and Jeremy Grant get offensive rebounds, get putbacks, finish pick and rolls. It seems like that's what Nora's going to be.
Outside of Jeremy Grant, who's a possible player that you kind of think mirrors what Jordan Nwora could be, at his peak? It's obviously kind of put you on the spot, and it's hard to kind of analyze through. Yeah,
it's hard. It's hard to say his peak because I don't think he'll ever be an all-star. Like that. I don't
think so either. I think he's going to be a solid role player throughout. So you kind of have to base it upon that. I'm trying to think of who it could possibly be.
You know who immediately came to mind. Although this guy is a big, and he's played center. JaMychal Green seems to be a good comp because JaMychal Green, no one really knows about him, right? And I'm not going to sit here and I don't want to say this on a little podcast, but I don't think a lot of people know who Jordan Nwora is around the league.
So I mean, they might know who he is, but they don't know much about him.
I think JaMychal Green made himself. He's obviously a 4. He's in a 4's body. I think he's 6'8", 6'9". And for the Clippers and Nuggets, JaMychal Green was 38, 39% three-point shooter. If Jordan can do that and play the 4, which I think Jordan will be a 4 in his NBA career, that it just immediately came to mind watching the Clippers the last couple of years. So
I have a comp, but like when I think about it, it sounds good. But when I kind of go a little bit further, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think if he reaches his ceiling, he can maybe get to like a Evan Fournier level. And what I mean by that, obviously Fournier is a guard, two totally different positions. He might not ever make as much money as Fournier because I feel like Fournier's gotten grossly overpaid at times.
He just got $72 million.
He gets grossly overpaid, but I mean that kind of fits the 14 to 15 million mantra possibly if he reaches where he needs to be. But Fournier is kind of, I wouldn't necessarily go as far as saying like an empty calorie guy, but he's a supporting piece. Mm-hmm. You can't use Fournier as a top 2 or 3 scoring option, or you shouldn't, or you're not going to win many games. Like tell the Magic that for the past X amount of years. But I think what Fournier does is he's a great shooter. And he kind of bases his game off of that. So I like that for Nwora. I didn't want to go J.J. Redick because comparing anybody to J.J. Redick is kind of tough because he's one of the top 5 or 6 best shooters in the NBA in my opinion, in NBA history. But ultimately,
if Jordan is he 23, 24? Like I mean he still has room for growth. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's not like it's not like he's this 19-year-old guy that is going to improve dramatically, but he has a lot of room for it. Like there's still a lot of years left for him to do it. So,
and I think that will come with the uptick in production, like we've seen this year, and hopefully more so next year. So, Shane, definitely love having you on. I would say plug us into your social media, but it's already listed below. Any final thoughts? Any final takeaways or anything like that?
Just in terms of NBA, I think that. Obviously it's Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone loves their college sports, but I think we're gearing up for one of the best stretch runs the NBA has ever seen because there's not a clear-cut favorite. Like there's not a title contender that you could say, hey, I'm putting all my money down on them because the Warriors have shown their slumps. Milwaukee's shown their slumps. Brooklyn still doesn't have all their guys. So if you love the NBA and you listen to this podcast, like I would suggest tuning into the last half of the season and playoff run because I legitimately don't know who's going to win the title.
That's definitely some good analysis there. And there's no better place you can find analysis from than my good friend. I mean, go check out his Twitter. I mean, he's got a bunch of just plays broken down and it just kind of breaks it down. It's a different way to view the game, and it kind of makes you
I appreciate you, man.
It's, people talk about the NBA like it's just isolation, run and gun. It's no defense, and that really just couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, but Shane breaks it down and shows you how it's a lot more complex than you would think it is, a lot more complex than the college arena. But no disrespect to either. That's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.